If you've ever been stressed about having a conversation about money, you're going to want to tune in today. Wait, Jill, why are you talking about money on a show called Humanizing Automation? Well, because how we deal with our money, how we have conversations about our money, and how we look at and understand the data around our money is actually something way more complex than you might think on the surface. And that is why I have brought to Humanize Automation a special guest. She is a financial expert, an author, a podcast host, a coach, and has this amazing quiz for helping you understand how you make decisions around money. So everyone stay tuned. This episode of Humanize Automation with my special guest, Lisa Chastain, is about to drop. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Humanize Automation. I'm your host, Dr. Jill Schiefelbein, and let's get down to it. Money. Money is something that people have varying levels of comfort with. And so it's really awesome that there are people like my guest, Lisa Chastain. She has a podcast. She's written books. She has this method on stopping budgeting. She has this fantastic quiz where you can dive in and understand better how you see money and your relationship with money. I mean, so many different things that she does we'll get into in this show. But Lisa, I'm so excited to have you on to kind of talk about this semi-taboo subject here.
A very taboo subject, I would say. People would rather, okay, women, I know your audience may be men and women, but women would rather go to the gynecologist or get undressed in front of each other than talk about money. That's how taboo it is.
And I think that that's so crazy. And I think, when I was talking to you before the show and getting to read, information on your website, understanding my different money type, what I think is really fascinating is those conversations, and I'm very curious on this. I used to be one of those women. Now I'm like, no, I'd much rather talk about money than do either of the things you just mentioned. But I used to be the other way around. And I think part of it for me personally was because my business depended on me being able to have a financial acumen and conversations in order to grow. But not everyone's an entrepreneur. Not everyone has to have those conversations.
Right. Not everybody has to have those conversations. Not in the globally, women are not in control of the money. Women only own 30% of the world's wealth. So it is just it's a dynamic moving target conversation that we must be having, which is why I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. And I mean, shoot, even in the US, it wasn't until 1988 till we could even get a business loan on our own. Right. I mean, right. In our lifetimes, this is not that long ago, guys. And this why I think it's so interesting that you do what you do and you focus on women a lot. And we have, on all sides listening to this show, but I think what's really interesting about it. So for those of you who may be not serving a women only audience, think about the niche audiences that you serve, or think of your customer segmentations and how you're doing this, because what I like about what you do, especially is you know your key audience, but then even within that key audience, you realize that they are not one amorphous blob. You know what I mean? They have many different personalities. So tell me, let's rewind. How did you get into being comfortable talking about money first off?
Massive failure. Massive. I couldn't ignore it anymore. So my mom managed the money of the household. My dad was the breadwinner. We have a family text. We tease about this now, but back when I was growing up, my mom handled the budget. She's the one that said yes and no to things. That was my experience with money growing up. It was my dad's money. My mom spent it. So growing up, we didn't have conversations about money. This is the case for so many people, is it's not modeled to us how to have conversation with money. And so as I grew up, I just handled things on my own. As I got into my first marriage, I just handled things on my own. And then I decided I'm a dreamer money personality too. So I decided to jump out of the plane without a parachute and open a business, not knowing not knowing how I was going to do it, but I did it. And I still wasn't asking for help. I was working in a financial firm, working with high net worth individuals as a financial advisor. And I was not asking for help because I thought that I should know better. I should know what to do. And so I was playing this role out in the world, and inside I wasn't talking to anybody about money. And it wasn't until I had to face my own financial failure, my business failing, I was running out of money, my marriage was on the brink, and I didn't know what else to do. So I had to raise my hand and ask for help, which was very painful, but that's the moment that everything changed for me because I hired a money coach. She was a business coach / money coach, and she got me in a new conversation that wasn't shameful, that was helpful, and purpose-driven and actionable. And I fell in love with that work, which is why I decided to leave the industry as a financial advisor, become a coach, because I'm like, this is work that I can do. And the more I started talking about it and the more I shared my story when I wrote my book, people just came out of the woodwork and said, me too. And that's still the case today.
I think it's amazing when you're willing to show some level of vulnerability and, share a story of truth and open up, that people not only flock to that, but you find out there are many more others. I mean, my business, when I first started it, the finances were the least favorite part of it. And it was a part where I felt the least confident. And in 2018, I had a male peer doing similar work. And we decided that for an entire year, we would be 100% transparent about our financials, about where we're like, if we were asked to speak, what we quoted as the initial fee, were we asked to negotiate or not? Were we, all these things. And aside from it being very depressing, how much I was asked to negotiate versus him and many other things along those lines. What was really fascinating to me about it is that finally feeling safe in a place to have those conversations and not being judged. Because I think too, people, and this is not only women, but I know for sure women, if we talk too much about financial acumen, you're posing, you're being, let's insert so many other words, right? You're not a baller, you're something else. And we're not supposed to talk about those type of things. Like, how did this become so taboo?
Well, I look back at data to be a pointer of how we got where we got. And to your point, in 88, it was only until the 80s that women could even take on our own business credit. And knowing the global statistic that we don't own most of the wealth, but we spend most of the wealth, women have been making decisions without it's not our money. And then we're getting shamed and judged and blamed and marketed to very strategically. And so it's a quagmire for women and it's a quagmire for men. I have people who come to me who have a ton of things going on, but in the world of success, they don't want to talk about it because somehow the numbers mean something. Somehow the numbers mean all the things, all that internal dialogue. I'm not worthy. I'm not okay. All the things. It's not true. But until we can neutralize the topic and neutralize what the numbers actually mean, people isolate themselves financially. Mm-hmm. So I think how did we get here? I think it's a culture and a society that's built on this model of success that is false.
Interesting. And it makes me think of so many narratives that we tell ourselves, so many conversations. I mean, and I'm not trying to pivot this conversation completely to AI, but it's the same type of thing as AI. The fear right now is AI replacing jobs. And I've always told people, I'm like, if you're good and talented at what you do, no, it's not going to replace you. But if you're doing something that can be replicated and you're average and not striving to get better, like, yeah, of course. And then people, you're the bringer of doom. I'm like, no, what is wrong with us being in a society where people are actually pushed to reach their potential and to expand on their capabilities and to broaden the conversations and relationships? And there's so many, I've seen them. I've been targeted by them. I'm sure many of you listening have too. Lisa, I'm sure you have too, of these, here's this loan. Here's how you need to manage this type of money. Here's, XYZ. And here's all this, financial advice that is done by an algorithm. And obviously I'm a huge proponent of artificial intelligence and what it can do to humanize things. But when you take the human element out of a financial conversation, period, like going back to the days of TurboTax, when it first became really popular, yes, it was a tool that helped people feel a little more comfortable and confident with, what they were doing in terms of filing taxes. But I will tell you, as soon as you added any layer of complexity to your tax situation, it tapped out.
It tapped out. If you're not a W-2 employee and that's it, it's not going to work for you. And you bring up such a great point about the job force and the workforce is that if you don't evolve, you die. Nature tells us that every step along the way, and we must evolve as human beings. We must evolve financially. That is the way of the world. So if you're not evolving, you're dying.
Yeah. And stagnancy does none of us any good.
Nope.
Right. It really, really doesn't. So when I think of, how I have experienced, and this is not me knocking fintech companies, because in my opinion, the ones that are doing it right are combining that data-driven artificial intelligence insights where you can get customers started on something immediately and empowering them to learn, combined with, like, I always tell people, humans do one thing better than any machine can ever do, which is create, sustain, and maintain and build relationships.
And
Machines aren't doing that, right? And communication is the underpinning of all of it, right? But if we now can take more of our time away from things that we're working on to be able to focus on that, then these conversations get a lot more significant.
Agreed. I agree. If I don't have to spend 10 hours aggregating data because some tool can do that for me, I can get to the heart of the actual problem. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. There are some wonderful tools in finance. ETFs, when I was a financial advisor, were terrifying for financial advisors. Like, everybody was like, oh my God, what is this going to do? Electronically traded funds? No way. Because advisors felt threatened. But the truth is, people still need help making decisions.
I think what's really interesting is so much of what you talk about is framed around this idea of decision making. And you hit the nail on the head with, not all people come to decisions in the same way. And we all have stories that we've told ourselves, experiences that we've had, past that we've had, that influence how we make those decisions, which is why you can't have the same generic conversation with every person about money, which is why, for example, and this is not me knocking people who start out like at H&R Block or anything like that, because there are some great, amazing, talented people there. But when you first get onboarded to train, it's here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's the question you ask, the question you ask, the question you ask. And while that does train you and get you a basic acumen, that's going to make you be at a place where you are replaceable. It's being able to extend that to uncover the decision-making process of a person, or the propensities or tendencies that we have, in your case around money, that really can help them thrive.
And have you ever read IRS code? I mean, come on. So someone goes to school for a very long time to learn how to be a CPA, to get the right certifications, and then they have to continue to educate themselves to interpret IRS code. Well, thanks ChatGPT, now I can throw that code in and it can interpret it for me and give me an answer. I don't have to spend $400 with a CPA to get an answer that I need. And so there are some really creative ways that we can take data and use it to interpret and make decisions. And that's what I love about the connection between the human element of finance and the great tools that are coming out through AI.
I'm teaching this business analytics course right now in the doctoral program at University of South Florida in their business college. And one of the conversations that my students and I constantly have is, we were, analyzing some sample data sets or whatever, and trying to here's 5 answers. Tell me which one is the best answer. And you're looking at the base data without having any context behind it. Now, this is what I love. And I think what I'm hearing you say, please correct me if I'm wrong, is machines can do that base data for us. It's the human insight and understanding that helps us drive the decision-making around that more effectively.
Agreed. Because applying it to someone's individual situation is the next step. The data is the data. The law is the law. The rule's the rule. But everybody has their own way of navigating that and wanting to use it for their own purposes. So some people don't care if they pay taxes. Like, I made money, I can pay taxes. That is a personal choice. Other people want to know, how can I not pay taxes? Yes. Give me this information to understand how I cannot pay taxes. That's an individual philosophical, moral conversation that a computer cannot give us the answer to.
And that's, ever since I brought on a CPA team for my business, it changed everything. They're like, what's your goal this year? Hey, this is where you're at. Do you have $5,000, $10,000 more of spending? Because it'll take you down a bracket if you do. That is amazing.
Right. It is. But then, everybody has their own relationship with risk, which is also a financial conversation. And so I love the work that I do because my clients can be seen and heard, because the data is just the data, but it's what we interpret, how we interpret it. Perception is projection, how we perceive things, how we learn things generationally, how things were taught to us. It's this whole quagmire of how, as humans, we make decisions and live our lives.
We go into these like mental labyrinths of, okay, if I choose this adventure, choose this other
That's
adventure,
right.
and trying to figure it out. What I would really love to know from your perspective, because this is kind of a curiosity to me. So let's say you're working with business owners, which I know you do work
Uh-huh.
with many. It's, not only the conversations around money, but you said something earlier about risk and tolerance with risk. How do you find those conversations being navigated differently? I mean, again, data is a data, but how are we navigating those conversations using that data around different type of risk types, especially for entrepreneurs?
Okay, so I'll use the money types as an example, and then I'll talk about the Colby A index. So if
Ah,
you know,
that's a good one.
yeah, okay, so you know what the Colby A is. So I the first thing I do is I have a client, and in the finance industry, the risk tolerant assessments, whether you're a broker dealer or an RIA, they have their own assessments that you have to take because they need to know what kind of risk you're willing to take to get the result that you want, so they can put you in the right investments. That's the foundation of it, right? But then the money personality speaks into how do you prefer to make decisions and what's driving those decisions. So we've got the avoider money personality type, which is someone who's conflict avoidant, which might or might not be someone who takes risks depending on where they're at in that conversation. If they don't know enough, they're probably not going to make a decision at all. There's the delusional Delilah, the dreamer.
That's
So
me.
that's me too. That's me too. We typically have a pretty high tolerance for risk, tend to be creative and entrepreneurial in our thought processes, think big, dream big, high level. Details are not necessarily our favorite part of any equation. If I can see the big picture, I'm going to go toward the big picture. The cheap chip or the saver money personality is someone who tends to think more analytically, makes slower decisions, and has a lower tolerance for risk. They don't enjoy risk taking. They'll take it as long as they have the right information. Typically, they like to hoard their money, more money, more money, more money, more money. And that can also be driven by scarcity conversations. So that's not even a data conversation. That's a mindset conversation. They tend to be people who live in scarcity. There's never going to be enough. On the opposite side of that is the spender, which might look the same as a dreamer, the way that they do things or the way that they spend money or money goes out. But the why behind it's very different. Someone who is a spender money personality is someone who tends to be more in the moment, impulsive. They are abundant. You'll hear them say things like, I can always go out and make more money. Money comes in and money goes out. They're the free-flowing kind of people of the world. They're the life of the party kind of people of the world. So their money correlates with that, the way that they build businesses, the way that they move money in and out. They're freer with it than a saver money personality. Then there's the giver. These are the people that start nonprofits. They wake up in service to others. Their why behind why they do what they do with their money comes from generosity. That's very different from a dreamer who wants results and success, which is very different from a saver and a spender. So we have to take those into consideration. And then if you couple that with the Colby, that's when things get really fun.
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump in real quick because what I want to emphasize based on, what I've read from your work too. And again, please chime in here if you want to add to this. It's that these titles, right? Like you hear the generous person. I'm like, well, I'm generous. I want to be a giver. No. This is not labeling you as a person. This is labeling the category that your responses fit in, because it will be in most cases, which all of these assessments are based on statistics like factor analysis and many other things, that this is your go-to tendency. That doesn't mean it applies in every situation. It's your go-to tendency. And this is also why then, if you feed the financial data and someone's tendency, we can even start to get a little more specific in what AI can generate as an output. But there are still so many other human factors that for that peak level of performance, really you need to be able to combine with to get there.
Exactly. Peak level of performance, I think, is such a great way of describing that. Some people are raised. So for example, this was my story. My parents so the way we imprint, this comes from psychology and neurolinguistic programming. We imprint from our families before the age of 7. My parents are savers. My mom's more of a over-generous Olivia. My dad's definitely a saver. He grew up in poverty. Okay. Save, pinch your pennies. We were thrift store kind of kids. My mom still does. They still love to go to garage sales. That's their mindset. Well, they're boomers too. So they grew up in a different world than we, okay. I'm a dreamer. So in terms of peak performance, counting my pennies, playing it safe, doing those things as a saver did not work for me. And I wasn't getting financial results subscribing to that philosophy, which is why I don't teach budgets, because they only work for someone who enjoys that kind of experience when there comes to money. That not everybody likes that. Not everybody will follow a system that way. So for peak performance, figure out who you are authentically, not where you came from, but how you're designed. What is your human design? Use these assessments to figure that out. And then we can create an investment portfolio that matches your tolerance, that matches your preference. Then we can create a savings plan based on what drives you. As a business owner, I can coach you based on your risk tolerance and what's going to feel good for you based on what I think is right. And then we use data to go, okay, well, let's run these trends. Let's run the data so you can make informed decisions, but still operate the way that you want to operate.
You know, I think it's really interesting. So my data mind immediately goes to, oh my gosh, like I am definitely the dreamer type as my leading, right? And like kind of like the Colby index, what's interesting is you have a sliding scales on all of them. So it's not like you're in one category. You have sliding scales on all of them. And again, it describes different tendencies. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is, you know, my parents were absolutely savers too. And I remember when I first started a business, you know, it took me bringing in more in my business for 5 years in a row than my dad made as his final salary after a very solid career, like as a high-level chemical engineer, to have him stop asking me about my plan B or mentioning a plan B or mentioning anything else. And it's just that the mindset, because no matter what, and many entrepreneurs come from families. I think it's like 70% of people who are entrepreneurs come from families who have an entrepreneur. Like you and I clearly are not those people.
Nope.
And so the conversations that I remember having about money with my parents when I first started this, I'm like, listen, I have a 5-year runway. I'm giving myself 5 years. If after 5 years I cannot contribute to a retirement plan, I do understand the importance of it. I'm not an idiot. Like, I have a plan B, right? Like I can always go back to teaching at a university or whatever, but like I want to do it. Yeah, like absolutely. And I think it's interesting, man, if we could now take not only financial data on risk, your type, your parents' type, your parents' parents' type, like combine all of this data together, you would like be able to target in on those conversations. But here's the thing, like, again, when it comes to things that you can automate, you have to have quality data in order to make those automations work. And unfortunately, in so many areas, we don't, which is where human ability to interpret things with people will, again, not be replaced.
Mm-hmm. It won't be replaced. You have to teach your brain how to see money in a way that works for you. And so the very first exercise to bring this to a very personable, actionable thing, the very first exercise I give to my clients before we make any decisions about what they should do with their money is a 90-day audit. We pull the data together because what does that data give us? Not just 1 month, 3 months worth of data. Where did you go? Who'd you go with? Why did you do it? What worked? What didn't work? What are the trends? And then what's negotiable? What's not negotiable? What needs to shift? What are you willing to shift? And who are you? And then we design a system that flows for them.
Right. I mean, I decide if I'm going to have a glass of wine, I want my Sancerre. I'm not going to settle for a Sauvignon Blanc. And that's going to be a necessity, right?
Not negotiable. I work hard. Why would I do? Yeah, exactly. It's not arbitrary.
Right. And there's strategic reasons why you spend behind what you spend. I spend a ton on travel. And if I'm going, on a trip with a client and I'm going to be in a place I've never been, I'm going to spend money and add extra days if my schedule permits to explore that. And I have people, different saver types, different decision-making types who will judge or look at me for that. And they're just like, oh, well, I could never do that. I'm like, I also have a car that's fully paid off that is 8 years old. That doesn't matter to me. And you have a car payment of $800 a month. Like they're choices that we make, right?
Exactly. I love it. That's what I love about this conversation.
No, I think it's fascinating. And I think too, it's, how you prioritize your spending is one thing, but I I want to shift this a little bit because with what you do, there is a lot of data involved. And with what any financial planner, any CPA, like there's a lot of data, and there is data that, I mean, data is data, right? Like it speaks, but it can be interpreted in many different ways. And that, again, that interpretation is still very human. You have ChatGPT, you have other financial tools that can give you possible interpretations, but until you pair that interpretation with the human that you're actually working with, you're going to have problems. But what I really want to know is when you are working with your customers now around this, how are you using AI? How are you using automations to either, free your time up or your team's time up, or to serve them in different ways than you didn't before?
Well, there's two things. So there's the internal way that I run my business that we're using AI to just exponentially move faster. Once AI gets to know me, I don't have to spend time. I can ask questions. It'll give me some answers. It gives me a framework. And as a quick start in my Colby, I love that. Give me options. For my clients, same thing. Give me scenarios. Give me options. If we do this, this, and this, how do we pull this data together so my client can see the different options that they have, the different paths that they can take? Choose your own adventure financially. It saves time. So QuickBooks, I love QuickBooks. It's getting much faster and much better at automating and categorizing. So then we can focus on higher level things. I love Rocket Money. Rocket Money is pulling together data. My clients are sending me downloading data very quickly, and we can analyze that much quicker. So those tools I think are super helpful so that we can spend the time on things that really matter.
What's cool about tools, and I use QuickBooks in my business, is you get so many visual dashboards. So even if you are not a super, data number type person, which a lot of people aren't, and that's perfectly fine, right? Yeah, most actually, I still like the visuals. I'll get into the data, but I'm like, ooh, that's a pretty graph. I want to look at that and I want to learn more, and so it's that type of visualization now that is becoming a little more automatic and becoming a little more mainstream, which I would imagine helps you even facilitate conversations better.
Absolutely. And I don't know why my mind just flashed back, but think back into the stock market when the stock market first started. People were down on the floor trading papers all day long. Thank God for automation today, because decisions can get made, things can move faster. And for someone who manages my own finances, I love that things can happen faster for me.
Well, and it's also democratized now too, because the way you were able to make trades before was in a very small little bucket, and you had to go through chains to get there. Now I can click open my Fidelity app right here and boom, make a trade right now without any problem.
I love also, this has been really fun to watch. So personally, I have not dove in, but I know tons of people in the financial industry and people like entrepreneurs that have jumped in and using robo programs for trading crypto, which has made it a lot faster, a lot more streamlined, more data versus emotion. So cryptocurrency, we're seeing a lot of bots come in and facilitate the trading. People are making money faster, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, not even to mention the story of what was it, the bot that made its own currency that, crazy, right?
Anyway.
No, it's really a good point though, because what's important to know about all of that though is you're still giving a human input into what that threshold is, what that risk level is. And when you've worked with someone who's helped you understand your decision-making tendencies, you can, I'm going to use this phrase, mitigate your risk. Even if you are a risk taker, you can be making more wise risks.
Agreed. More informed risk. If you look
That's a good phrase.
That's what I would say that AI has really helped in the finance industry, is it takes some of the emotion out of it if you're using it properly. Money is very emotional. It can't not be emotional. People in the finance world like to make it like it's not. But if you look at how the stock market moves, it's emotional. So AI is just helping us remove some of that emotion to get better and faster results. And I think that's a good thing.
I think back to 2012 when I got my first financial planner, who I'm still with today. And I use this example in one of my books and everything, but it's about the human element of conversation. So talking about financial, which is a thing that people on the surface are like, well, this isn't an emotional thing. Oh no, it's insanely emotional. And I
Yeah.
will never forget walking into his office that day, my little printouts of my bank statements, feeling like a complete and utter failure. Like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed to show these and whatever it is. Going in there, and he sat down, and the first thing he did was not touch those statements, was not look at numbers. He said, I want to know in 3 words, what does money mean to you? I'm like, huh? I'm like, he's like 3 different words. Like we can even start with one. Like, what does money mean to you at the end of the day? And the number one thing that came back to for me was safety. That was my word. And then we dove down into that and what that meant, which is interesting, especially as a dreamer, right? Because I am definitely a risk taker. But at that point in time in my life, I had just, recovered from surgery with cervical cancer that cost me about 75 grand in medical debt, because it was legal for insurance companies at that time to say, we'll insure you, but we won't cover any of your female organs. So I'm like sitting here, I'm thinking I never can go through this again, because I had to quit my first business and go back to working full time solely to have insurance.
Wow.
Even though my business wasn't failing, but it had failed. Like I had to pay that debt off for years. And, for some people now, they're like $75,000. For some people, that's a lot of money. For some, it's nothing. It's whatever that relativeness is for you. Like that was a life-changing thing for me. And that conversation with money meaning safety was huge. And so I've now always looked at it as in, I run my own like litmus test of decisions through, at the end of the day, am I safe? Right? Am I going to still have options? Optionality then became kind of like the second tier under that, because if I do find my dream, I want to know that I have options to pursue it. Right. And so even in having this conversation with you and remembering that, 12, 13 years ago right now, it's really making me think about how when we even service our customers, right? Every financial planner has a different approach to onboarding. You have one that's way more in depth than some, because you get this archetype, you get this human, this personality and decision mentality data to pair with it. So you're starting off, at a different level already. But then when we're communicating to our customers on a regular basis, I still see people, even though knowing their customers are very different, communicating in the same way when they're sending out company email or product email or information. How do you navigate that in your company?
That's such a great question. Well, I think it starts with the assumption that no one's the same. And so we're going to communicate what we need to communicate as differently as possible, knowing that we're speaking to 5 different money personalities. My team's very aware of that. And also through neurolinguistic programming. So there's 4 or 5, I'm going to go through it. So there's people who are auditory, people who are visual, people who are kinesthetic, and people who are auditory digital. So people process information in different ways. We have to be communicating with people from those individual preferences, not my preference, but how they think. So we're incorporating those different modalities and those different money personalities into our emails so that we can, at one given time, work with someone or speak to someone in the way that they need to hear it, in the pain point or the challenge that they're facing. So we start with the money personalities because then we know who they are, and they get different emails based on that. That's the entry point into my world. Like, well, think about this. Go here. Look at this information. It's very helpful.
I think that's fascinating. And it's so, I love that you're doing it, number one. But I think when I talk to people about, why I care so much about, this whole AI thing. Well, number one, it's been around for 6 decades, so it's not new. But this whole generative AI movement that's come around in the past handful of years, and what it allows us to do, it allows us to be more personalized in how we serve our clients. It allows us to customize things better. And my favorite, and what you just you said too, it gives them agency. And by that, I mean agency of choice. If you know someone's more of an auditory learner, you can, with one click, yay, thumbs up on my Mac here. With one click, you can turn any material content you have into auditory only, into a visual piece, into all of these different ways that people learn without spending an exponential amount of time. And to me, that's where this whole automation thing, this whole generative AI thing allows us to reach people where they are in so many more meaningful ways,
Agreed.
especially when you're like you and you already have, and this is what most people miss, you already have that base differentiation or categorization data in order. But a lot of people don't get there.
They don't, because they're only processing and interpreting based on who they are. And that's the miss.
It is such a miss. I have people tell me all the time, oh, well, I don't consume content that way. And I'm like, great. And depending on what it is, normally I have statistics to back me up. I'm glad that 85% of your target population that you told me you want to work with does. So,
Well, good luck with that. It's just like hiring practices, right? We do this because I've done business coaching and support for years and business development teaching, is that if you're just looking from your own lens and you hire people who are just like you, then you're missing out on this different subsets of populations. No wonder why you can't go to the next level.
I mean, and if you're comfortable staying stagnant on a plateau, by all means, like, again, different risk types, different decision types, different business desire types, all of those things. But, I just think there's so much more potential for all of us to feel seen more, to feel understood more. And I think that's kind of beautiful.
I agree.
When I think about what you're doing, it brings one thing to mind. So I'm going to kind of shift this conversation just a little bit as we start to wrap up on something that came to me as we were talking. And as, I went through your quiz, and everybody, I'm going to put all of this stuff in the show notes and everything. Definitely go take the quiz. It costs you nothing to go take this quiz. And it's just a really interesting, quick insight, right? It's obviously a quick insight. There's so much more that goes into it. But so here is, literally, we have now done this so I have my consulting company, my second company, Render, that produces these, awesome avatars or whatever. One of the things we've been experimenting with and automating, right? Because again, people aren't going to do this as much if it's not automated. And this is something that is in our final stages of testing right now. So it's not even out like right yet as of today as we're talking, but it's like right there. Mm-hmm. You can now have an assessment with data that then you export that data after you've taken the assessment to a pre-filled set of scripts that then makes the data in, now then delivers that video in your likeness as their coach in different situations. And AI generates different analogies and metaphors based on every type for you.
Amazing.
Like, isn't that nuts?
That's amazing.
Like, it's nuts. And when you are in a business where your likeness matters, right? Yeah. Like, people are working with you because they trust you. This is kind of that reinforcement. I'm talking to college advisors right now, and I'm trying to maneuver this thing where when students are taking these, what might your major type be assessments before that, we can have their results delivered by the likeness of the advisor who they will meet in person to kind of minimize that first barrier of introduction. And it's phenomenal when we can use this to be more human. So what I love about it is, we could manually set it up, right? With the scripting and manually doing all this. But now you do a little bit of data input. You have the scripts with variable fields, and you have your prescribed, approved data set for analogies, for metaphors, for teaching tools. It is now all automated. And then you can even track how many things people have viewed. So then you can have other automations on top of that say, hey, Jill, I know as a dreamer, you probably found something that really interested you and hit home. So you bailed and you went to work on it. That's absolutely fantastic. I want to remind you, though, that there's another thing there that may actually set you off on a different course. So don't count us out yet, whatever it may be.
Amazing.
You can give these things. And I think that's, for me, those are the examples of when you have data on your customer, like you do in your company, which is what made me think to mind. I'm like, God, you already have these segments on top of all the other data that you gather around financial information. Like, you have so much great data that now we can have those more humanized automations. And again, it is not replacing you. Because when it comes down to having those hard decisions, but now they're showing up to you about 80% of the way of the conversation. So now, wow, that 20%, instead of spending, 40 minutes getting to that part where you only have 20 minutes left, like, you spend the whole hour, operating at this, again, peak performance type zone.
I love it.
It just excites the heck out of me. And this is why I do this and love these conversations. So thank you for letting me, flip it on its head for a minute.
I think that's profound. That's really profound because for me, when I think about AR, just starting this conversation, jumping into the conversation, I was thinking about efficiency. Efficiency coupled by personalization and impact changes the world.
I 100% agree. And I think that combined with also then crowdsourcing of people who are trying to achieve similar goals, sharing data, honest data, right?
Honest data.
And that's the thing. There is this, I judged this entrepreneurial competition back in, I think it was like 2016 or 2017 when I was living in New York City, and it was a for good, global entrepreneurial competition. And the group that won was actually a group that was facilitating shared data crowdsourcing by farmers in Kenya. So in these rural areas where everyone does have a mobile device, or there's like one central hub where you can go, like generator stores. I was in Kenya in 2016. Generator stores where you go and charge your devices were more popular than grocery stores in some areas. And it was fascinating. But if you have access to that data, what they did was they were allowing this platform and these, kiosks, if you will, where farmers could go and put in, hey, my crops are impacted by this, check your livestock or whatever it was, to facilitate faster share of information. And I can't even imagine what that is like now with generative AI and all of that in place.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh. Lisa, I know we need to wrap up here. I definitely want to give you kind of the final word in terms of when people are thinking of how they make decisions around money, aside from listening to your podcast and reading your book and, and taking the quiz and all the things that we'll put in the show notes, which are super good, guys. So definitely go check them out. What's kind of a lasting thought you want to leave?
Get curious. I get a lot of people in my world who are rule followers and they just want to know the rules. But the ultimate way to having success and creating a life that you love is to get curious about why you do what you do in the first place. So all of the tools that I offer and just getting started in my world, I want you to listen and to join from a place of curiosity, not from a place of right or wrong. Because when we get more curious about why we do what we do and what the data means, then those are the conversations that are going to continue to propel you forward, the world forward. And that's where I want to have conversations when it comes to money. So get curious. There's more questions than there are answers.
I love it. And hey, if you need a place to start, use ChatGPT to generate some of those questions to make you even more curious.
There you go. My second book, I did my second book this way because I wanted my second book to feel like you're working with me. And at the end of every chapter, there's questions. And if you do the work, the answers are there for you.
Yeah. It's key phrase, if you do the work.
If you do the work.
And again, none of this technology, coaching, AI, generation, automation, it's not a silver bullet. You have to do the work to get it in place. But oh my gosh, Lisa, curious is one of my favorite words. So I love that you ended with that. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing not only your insights, but how that advice operates and how we can learn to be better and be more human in how we manage finance.
I love it. Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Everybody, stay tuned. Another episode will be dropping next week. And as always, questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, drop those in, rate the show, subscribe, all those good things. I love to hear from you. Thanks again for tuning in.